A good afternoon from sacred space at Titania's realm. The time is 1:02 p.m. on Sunday, the 5th of April 2026. If you're a Christian, you'll be celebrating, or at very least observing, Easter Sunday. Hope that naughty Easter bunny's been generous and brought you lots of chocolate. All the little children going on their Easter bunny hunts. I must say, when I was a little Christian girl raised in a Lutheran and spiritualist family, that used to be one of the highlights of my year, was going Easter egg hunting. And my mother was so crazy in many ways. I mean, she was also a trauma survivor, having survived World War II and Nazi Germany, and a very brutal New Zealand airman husband. The husband before my father was brutal. So she survived many things, my mother, as most human beings, but hers was very cumulative and evil, but like my life history too. But anyway, so she would be a bit scatterbrained, and when she was married to my father, she existed on diazepam, Valium, sleeping tablets, slimming tablets, to the point where she would tear her hair out just like Lee Resnick in Requiem for a Dream, and grinding all her teeth, which were already dentured, and she would look at me and say, "You know, darling, I think these slimming tablets are not doing me any good," which of course they weren't, because they were actually amphetamines, and speeding her off her dial, and then taking the sleeping tablets, which are downers, and the barbiturates, was not a good mix. So, but anyway, one of the funniest memories from celebrating Easter Sunday was she would very sweetly, because you do these things for your children, don't you? I used to do all sorts of things for my little children and spoil them lavishly at Hanukkah time, and at Pesach time we would have seders and have them search for the afikoman, which is nowhere near as fun actually as searching for actual chocolate on Easter Sunday, but it's par for the course, isn't it? But one of the sweeter memories was one year my mother was so off her head, in a state, very bad marriage and working incredibly hard. I have to say she did work hard, my mother, and to pay the mortgage, because she was obsessed with wealth, which is fine. It worked out for her ultimately until she married the last con man asshole, and never mind. We won't go there with that. I'll get depressed again. But anyway, so this particular Easter Sunday, I'd been on my little, Easter bunny hunt looking for all the lovely chocolate eggs, and I was terribly excited. It was only about 6 or 7, I think. I can't remember how old I was. Anyway, I thought I'd gathered up all the yummy chocolate eggs and treats, so I was very happy and grateful and satisfied with my lot, as most children are, because we don't know what's ahead of us in life, do we? If we knew, we probably wouldn't even bother continuing life, but we do. Somehow we find our way. Anyway, a few short weeks went by, so it was a couple of weeks later, and I still remember it as clear as day to this very day. My mother opened up the oven to put a cake in or something, cook something in the oven. She didn't cook that often, obviously, because she opened up the oven and I heard her say, "Oh, Gott Mensch," which translates to, "Oh dear Lord," kind of thing. Although Mensch technically means human being, but anyway, Germans say Mensch a lot. And so I trot along behind her and I said, "What's wrong, Mummy?" She says, "Ach was, I forgot an Easter egg is here, still in the oven. It was quite a big Easter egg too. And I was like, yes. And so she goes, well, you might as well have it. It's 2 weeks after the event, but I'm sure you won't complain, Tanya. And I said, no, Mummy, I won't complain at all. And then she looked at me, and in all honesty, she says, oh, Val, you're not, darling. It just goes to show how much I cook in this oven. And I nodded, and we kind of had to laugh at each other. So that's one of the few happy memories I have of my mother, her forgetting all the stash of Easter eggs that she'd put for me to search for Easter Sunday. So anyway, I mean, it's possible she planted it there and she bought it later, but no, I think she genuinely did forget it was there. Another happy memory on the subject of Easter bunnies and chocolate bunnies was I had these elderly friends, Kit and Joe Harris, who I knew from my Jewish temple back in New Zealand, which is called Temple Sinai, and in Gusney Street in Wellington. I'm sure it's still operating. And that was the temple where I did my Jewish conversion when I started going there when I was only 17. And anyway, they loved me in that congregation. They truly did love me. It was actually a bit of a wrench to leave and migrate to Australia and leave that wonderful congregation behind, because there were so many people there, including people who had actually survived Auschwitz, who was so kind to me and my German mother. And it was only when I migrated here to Brisbane that the othering and the savagery began, and I was falsely accused of being a Nazi. So that caused a lot of emotional and spiritual and indeed physical depression and distress to me. It was beyond awful what I was put through. But anyway, in that congregation in Wellington, New Zealand, where people were kind and nurturing and just, I think, grateful to have some young people coming, because they knew that, you know, I was getting married and that I'd have babies, and add to the community, the wider community. More Jews and bums on seats, am I right? Pity my bum ended up being viewed as a bum here in Australia, and I was really badly treated and maligned, but it is what it is. But anyway, I had these wonderful friends, Kit and Joe Harris. Kit's real name was Catherine, and she reclaimed her name quite late in life, in her 80s. She turned to me one day and she said, I ask you to never call me Kit again. And I said, well, why? I said, that's how I've always known you. She said, no, my name is Catherine and I'm reclaiming my name. I'm tired of being Kit, like pack up the kit of the old, how does that song go? Of the old kit bag and roll. I'm tired of that. She said, I'm no longer a product of the war years. She said, I want my name and my identity back. And I looked at her and I said to her, that is a perfectly reasonable thing to want, your true identity and your true name, so I will honour that. So even though it was difficult and I'd still sometimes go to call her Kit out of force of habit, I began calling her Catherine. Anyway, Catherine and Joe Harris used to delight in waiting for me at the end of our services on Shabbat mornings. We would queue up, to go to Kiddush, which is a blessing over the wine and bread, and then you'd have a bit of an afternoon tea after the morning service, which was a lovely tradition. And so Kit, see, I still do it. Forgive me, Catherine. So Catherine and Joe would queue up and wait for their Shabbos morning kiss from me, and it caught on. It became a bit of a contagion. Before I knew, even the younger men would be in the queue waiting for a kiss. So I'd say, I can't kiss you because I'm a married woman and you're an unmarried man, so we'll just shake on the deal. And they'd nod and we'd shake hands, and they'd go, but really, Tanya, everyone else gets a little kiss. I went, all right, you get a little kiss too, but don't run with it because I'm a respectable married woman. And everyone in the queue, all the elderly couples, many of them, not many of them, but a few of them had survived Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, hadn't had children for whatever reason, the worst possible reasons, but we don't even want to think about that. So they would line up, and I was like their proxy, I guess, granddaughter or great-granddaughter that they would have had they not been tortured by the Nazi regime. So they delighted in that, and they would all line up and blush with excitement and happiness. So anyway, even after I migrated here to Brisbane on the 1st of August 1988 and regretfully left my wonderful friends in that congregation behind, the only couple I still kept regular contact with, because we adored each other and they were very sweet to me always, was Catherine and Joe Harris. And they were so sweet. Now, originally they would have been Orthodox Jews, but they'd, I don't know why exactly, but they'd joined the Reform movement and became Reform Jews, which is the progressive Jewish, movement that actually started around about the 1800s. So anyway, they were so sweet, the two of them. I would get a phone call from my friend Joe, would be on the phone, and in this really gravelly but almost lascivious voice, I'd pick up the phone, hello, and I'd hear, it's your boyfriend. And because I'm a bit prudish and a bit weird, and I think, is this some prank caller or some weirdo? I'd go, and hang up, because I don't have time to waste on idiots and prank callers. And because he'd put on a funny voice, I wouldn't even realise it was my friend Joe. He was winding me up something chronic, which was cute and funny at the same time. He's the only man on earth that could get away with that and not get slapped up the side of the head or kicked up the wazoo, because I adored them. So anyway, they would ring back, of course, because they knew how I'd react. Then bang, would go the phone. So they'd ring immediately back, and it would be Catherine or Kit, and she'd say, it's us, you silly girl, it's us calling you. We're on the Gold Coast. Are you going to come and visit us? For some reason, they never stayed in Brisbane. They always went to the Gold Coast. And I'd say, yes, when would it suit you for me to come bring the children and visit you? And we would make arrangements. When I was still married with my husband, we'd all go down together. We had a really lovely time with them. One time we went down, they were staying down at Broadbeach in a motel that had a swimming pool in the shape of Australia. It was a wonderful swimming pool. And Joe kept saying to me, don't you love Australia? And I'm like, I'm really loving Australia right now, Joe. Swimming in this pool with the children, having a fabulous time. But how I got into the segue was, Joe, they would generally come around about Easter or Passover time. I don't know for exactly what reason it was. Oh yes, I do know. It had something to do, Joe had been in the Z forces, the special forces during World War II. So they would meet once a year, the Z forces, have some kind of commemoration or gathering of all the survivors from the Z forces. So I asked him, I said, how did you survive World War II in Europe, you know, in the Z forces. And he was a very short person, very, very short, hobbit, like just like me. They were both very short. He said, "Look at me. What could I have done with a big gun and artillery on my back?" He said, "I'm tiny. I'm a little man." He said, "But they had me." His job, I'm sure he didn't tell me the full story because a lot of it was secret. He said, "My job was to count all the ammunition and give out the ammunition." And that's why, he said, "I had a very good time in the war." He said, "I didn't really have to do all that much fighting because look at me, I'm tiny." And he would make a joke of it, and Catherine would sit beside him and just look at me and go, because he was playing it down. But he was a very sweet, almost childlike at times, very humble person. And he was always happy-go-lucky and singing little ditties to my children. And he was just, I just adored them. They were just the sweetest couple. Hey, Kermie, you do that again and you'll get separated. No, that was very bad, Kermie. Bad bird, bad bird. To keep an eye on him. So anyway, I'm watching you, bad bird. Yes, you'll go inside and Bo can stay out in the garden on his own and enjoy himself and not be bullied and harassed by you. It's the first time he's done that in a while, actually. He's been good. So anyway, Joe's thing that he loved to do when they came to the Gold Coast was it would often coincide with Easter and Passover, which happened roughly at the same time every year. And so he, it's actually even more complicated because at that time, so I can tell you what year it was 1994. I was doing undertaking. It really was a kind of an undertaker's game. It was so savage and again malignant and slanderous and vicious towards me. But anyway, I was undertaking my Orthodox conversion because I got it in my head that my daughters wouldn't able to get married unless I converted Orthodox, and that they were somehow untouchable because we were Reform and there weren't many little boys to choose from in our own community, and they'd all grown up with each other, and I knew they wouldn't want to marry each other when they grew up because you very rarely marry your childhood sweethearts or your childhood friends. It's just how it usually goes. So I worried that they would have slim pickings of marriage material unless I converted Orthodox. And in those days I was quite religious. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? So anyway, I put myself through all that thinking that I was doing the right thing for the sake of my daughters. And they never married anyway after all that. Certainly no one Jewish, no one not Jewish, didn't work out. So I don't know what that was about. It was a journey I had to go on, I guess. One of the Holy One's missions he sends me on that go round and round and actually achieve nothing but more pain and more viciousness. But anyway, we won't go thinking about that now. So I get this phone call from Joe. "It's your boyfriend." "Oh, hello, what are you doing? Are you in Brisbane?" "We were in the Gold Coast, come and see us." Oh, they were so sweet how they used to like to surprise me. So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I trot off down to visit them in the Gold Coast. And it was about an hour and a half drive, I think, because they were down at Broadbeach. Was it Broadbeach or further down? Further down, near the border. Coolangatta or something. Anyway, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter now where exactly they were. And I get there and they were both so happy to see me and the children. For some reason, my husband didn't come along. We were still married in 1994. The marriage was crumbling and imploding, rightfully so. But anyway, So I get there, and Joe had these enormous chocolate Easter bunnies. They were that big, 2, 1 for each child. I said, Joe, it's a beautiful gift. I said, but you know I'm doing my Orthodox conversion, and that chocolate's not kosher, and also it's Pesach, so they technically can't have it because chometz. And he just looked at me like he wanted to slap me over my head, and he said, I see these children only once a year, and it's Easter, and by all the gods, he said, they are going to have their Easter bunnies. Do or die, Tanya. Do you understand? And I was about to fight him because I was very rigid, you know, keeping a kosher house, everything completely glut kosher, and really striving hard to be an Orthodox Jew and do everything by the book. And Catherine said, don't fight him on this, Tanya. It's his one bit of happiness to spoil your little children once a year when we come to the Gold Coast. Which was a little bit of manipulation on their part, to be fair. But I thought about it in the broad scheme of it, and I thought, what does it really matter? You know, a bit of chocolate Easter bunny and joy with Kit and Joe Harris. These are memories that can't be taken from my children. I wonder if they still remember them, but I still remember them. I am a shaman, and I am the memory keeper and the storyteller. So I looked at them and I said, you know what? You're right. Let them enjoy it with you. So, like little children, he helped them open up the bunnies and asked them if they were going to eat the ears first or the feet first. My children were thrilled to bits. They were about 8 and 6 at the time. They were so thrilled, and they were all so happy. And then he sang them the little chook chook song, which is something about chickens laying eggs and only laying eggs at Easter and 3:30, and that was delightful. And I just looked at them and I was so deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy with my marriage dying, all the savagery that was going around in the background with my Orthodox conversion, people being vicious and malignant. I thought, this is just like a balm to our souls. And as I said in my video yesterday, do they celebrate heaven or Passover? Do they celebrate Easter or Passover in heaven? You know, and the grandeur that is the multiverses, to all these little rigid little religiosities and dogmas and rules and regulations, do they really matter in paradise? We create our own paradise. We do. And harm ye none, so it is done. I know that's the Wiccan read, but we do. We create our own paradise. All these rigid belief systems, all they do is kind of prove what? That you're a better Jew than someone else? Not necessarily. That you're a better human being than someone else? Not necessarily. So it was a journey that I was on, and deep learning, and a lot of epiphanies and revelations, and my Orthodox born but Reformed Jewish friends reminded me that there were bigger things at play than withholding a gift of chocolate bunnies on Easter Sunday to my Jewish children. Children don't care. They just want their little treats and their chocolate. So anyway, so they were spoiled lavishly is what I was saying by Catherine and Joe. And they were so full of joy and delight and happiness. And Actually, it was a bit life-saving for me because I was really brought low in that time period, and not really knowing which way to jump, as it were. And Catherine reminded me at that time, I think she could see that I was struggling. She said, whatever happens, Tanya, you just stay true to you and what you know is good for you and your children, and make the best of life, and that's all anyone can do, which was very wise counsel. And here we are, sore teeth and all, making the best of life in our garden with a nice cup of tea, telling you mad stories about Easter Sunday and chocolate bunnies. So whether you eat the ears or the feet, just enjoy your chocolate bunnies. And I've got the kookaburra here, just flew down. I threw chicken scraps down for him and the crows yesterday, and they were delighted. But I haven't got any scraps left today. But they're all here eating, you know, the seeds that are on offer, and calling out and being rather raucous. And I'll show you Cookie. Can you see her? Hello, Kookaburra. Hello, Kookaburra. And, oh, one above my head. Hello, my darling. How are you? You're a beautiful bird. And we had the currawong again. I saw him about an hour ago. And he's also a beautiful bird. But don't you love how they just sit above my head and hang out with me? Can't see it. And listen to my stories. So you see, life is really for the birdies now. They appreciate all the energy output I put out into the sacred space garden, and some of the seed eaters appreciate the seeds I give them, and some of them appreciate the scraps of chicken and meat when I have it to share. The kookaburras really do appreciate that the most, and life is beautiful. So on that note, we're 27 minutes in. Let us continue with a chapter, yes, that is correct, chapter 9 of Tonka. There were still times when he would, as it were, try to ambush her. He would ask what seemed to be a perfectly harmless question, hoping that the smooth sound of the words would take her off her guard. But more often it was he who was taken unawares and defeated. Now listen, Mr. Crow, I'm trying to read stories here and you're competing for attention. There's no chicken today. I gave you a lot yesterday and that was all there was. Swings and roundabouts, swings and roundabouts. It's a feast or a famine, my boys. A bloody feast or a famine. My friend Tarina tells me that the shops are stripped bare of all the fresh food and vegetables, which is a great worry. Hey, Kermit, I'm going to have to separate them. He's being aggressive today. So before we get into the story, I've got to move him inside. Just for a moment. That's twice I saw you biting, little guy. So you know what? You can go in the house. In the house for bad birds. Yes? You don't get to be in the garden with me. No. Bad birds go in the house. boat. It's safe now. You have to keep you separated. Keep you separated. Alright, calm your phone. My goodness. I put him in his inside cage and he immediately went tweet, 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 tweet. And I went, well, that's what happens when you're a bad boy. He'll learn. He'll learn very bloody quickly. Don't get to have fun in the garden if you're going to be a bully. He's usually pretty good, so probably with the wind coming up, he's got a bug in his ear or whatever you call it. Right, where were we? Let me just see. Let's start that paragraph from the top. There were still times when he would, as it were, try to ambush her. He would ask what seemed to be a perfectly harmless question, hoping that the smooth sound of the words would take her off guard. But more often it was he who was taken unawares and defeated. Look, it's absolutely senseless going on denying it, he would say coaxingly. Come on now, tell me. Then everything will be just the way it used to be. How on earth did it happen? He's still trying to figure out how she got pregnant, you understand. But her answer was always the same. Send me away if you won't believe me. That was, of course, her way of making the most of her own helplessness. But it was also the most genuine answer she could give. What's the matter, Bo? You're not used to being outside on your own. Oh my goodness. I don't know who he's reacting to, I can't see it. Well, for she had no medical or philosophical arguments to defend herself with. All she could do was to vouch for the truth of her words with the truth of her whole being. Then he would go with her whenever she went out, because he did not dare to leave her alone. There was nothing definite that he feared, but it made him uneasy to think of her alone in the great alien streets of the city. And when he would meet her somewhere in the evenings, and they walked along, and in the dusk they would pass some man who gave no sign of knowing them, he would sometimes have the feeling that the man's face was familiar, and it seemed to him that Tonka blushed. And all at once he would remember that there had been an occasion when they had been together with this man. Instantly then, and with a certainty equal to the certainty he felt when gazing into Tonka's innocent face, he would have the conviction, this is the one. Once it seemed to be a well-to-do young man who was learning the business in an export firm, and whom they had met a few times. Once it was a tenor who had worked in a café chantant until he lost his voice, and who had a room in the same lodging house as Tonka. Baby Crow is so demanding. Honestly, that kid would drive me nuts. Its mother just looked at me as if to say, oh, I know. They're very sweet, the two of them. Right. They were always such ludicrously marginal figures. They were like dirty parcels thrown into his memory, tied up with string, each parcel containing the truth. But at the first attempt to undo it, the package would disintegrate, leaving him with nothing but an agonizing sense of helplessness and a heap of dust. Kearney's realised he's been separated for being a bad bird. Yes. Bo. These certainties of Tonka's infidelity had indeed something of the quality of dreams. Tonka endured them with all that touching, dumbly affectionate humility of hers. But how many different meanings that could have. And then, yes, my darling, going through his memories, he began to see how ambiguous they all were. No, you can't have my sesame snaps. No, they're not for birds. Well, they probably are, but he's not having them. Mama T has spoken. I give you so much. You're not having my sweets. Right. Gotta draw the line somewhere, don't you? By the gods. Well, you got a bowl full of seeds. What do you want my sesame seeds for? Look at this little munchkin bossing me about. Right. For instance, the very simplicity of the way she attached herself to him could equally well mean that she did not care one way or the other, or that she was following her heart. The way she served him could indicate either apathy or a delight in doing it. Boys, can you stop competing? Just knock it off, all of you. It's getting a bit silly now. Might that dog-like devotion of hers not mean that she could follow any master like a dog? This was something he had, after all, sensed in that first night, implying that she was easy when in actual fact she felt coerced and bloody terrified. People of Earth. Had it in fact been her first night? She had only paid attention to her emotion. So, he had only paid attention to her emotional reactions, and certainly there had been no very perceptible physical signs. What are you doing, you crows? Are you coming to see me? Okay. Yes. Baby crow's a demanding little brat, but he's cute and adorable. Cute and adorable. You coming up on the table now? Look at this. Heckle and Jekyll and Schmeckle. All right. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? You've got all the seeds, you've eaten all the cracked corn, you've eaten all the other favourite things like the sunflower seeds, and you've just thrown everything else all over the ground, made a hell of a mess. But that's okay, that doesn't faze me. Look at you, spoilt little crows. Right. Where were we? We'll repeat that line, sorry, distracted by the birdie shenanigans. He had only paid attention to her emotional reactions, and certainly there had been no very perceptible physical signs. And now it was too late. His silence was now a blanket over everything, and might equally well indicate innocence or obduracy, could equally well mean cunning or sorrow, remorse or fear. But then too it might mean that she was ashamed on his behalf. Yet it would not have helped him, even if he could have lived all of it all over again. Once a human being is mistrusted, the plainest signs of faithfulness will positively turn into signs of unfaithfulness. On the other hand, where there is trust, the most glaring evidence of unfaithfulness will seem to be signs of misunderstood faithfulness, crying like a child that the grown-ups have locked out. Nothing could be interpreted on its own merits alone. One thing depended on the other. One had to trust or mistrust the whole of it, love it or take it for deceit and delusion. If one was to understand Tonka, one had to respond to her in one definite way. One had, as it were, to call out to her, telling her who she was. What she was depended almost entirely on him. And so Tonka would become a blur, mildly dazzling as a fairy tale. That is a soul murder, to take away a woman's identity like that. Soul murder. I've had them all, the soul murderers. Up to here. Soul rapists and soul murderers. Let them rot in hell. Right, on we go. And he wrote to his mother. Her legs are as long from the foot to the knee as from the knee to the hip. Long legs that walk like a pair of twins without tiring. Her skin is not delicate, but it is white and without blemish. Her breasts are almost a little too heavy, and the hair in her armpits is dark and matted, which looks charmingly shameful on that slender white body. It was not the fashion to shave your armpits in those days. Her hair hangs down in loose strands over her ears, and at times she thinks she has to take the curling tongs to it and do it up high, which makes her look like a servant girl. You back, Mrs. Crow? Are you back, beautiful girl? Look at this. Look at this. Say hello to the people of Earth. Yes. There's little Bo whistling to you. And, oh, Kookaburra's here. Hello, Cookie. And Mr. Crow, he's watching. You're so quiet, Cookie. I didn't even know you were there. Beautiful boy. See how loved I am? I sit here like Snow White. I could have married a dwarf who wanted me to run off to Dubai with him. But I drew the line because he was a lascivious little man. So that was the end of that. Oh, you have to laugh. It's not actually funny when I think about it. Certainly wasn't funny at the time, but I can laugh about it now. Anyway. Yes, I prefer to sit with my other two-legged ones, who are also small of stature and a bit feathery, really. Much better and reliable friends, aren't they? She's, not if I take your eye out with my beak, Mama T. But you won't be doing that, will you? No, because you're a good birdie. Fawning and appeasing even with the birds. By the God. Well, I guess if I died here, they'd pluck my eyes out, but I'd be dead, so I wouldn't know. Yes, it does get that dark at Sacred Space at times. Look, it really is like a general, when I turn the phone around to film and they flutter away, but it really is like Hitchcock's The Birds some days, except they're not sinister. They really are watching over me and surrounding me. So much love. Yes, my darlings. Yes. Cupboard love. Cupboard love. They said, that's not fair, Mama T. We loved you long before you started feeding us boiled bird seeds. Which is true. I'm being cynical. What's going on with you? All of you. Is there a storm coming? Are you trying to tell me things that I don't understand because I'm a mere human? Yes, she says. Yes. Pretty bird. Pretty birdie. Baby bird likes a good conversation. Yes, she does. Right. And that surely is the only harm she has ever done in her life, putting her hair up to look like a servant girl. What you doing? They don't like the sound of the sirens. That really unhinged them. It's only humans trying not to die, people of Earth. It's all right. Doesn't impact you, birdies. Bah. 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 How is it that both your parents have got really white looking eyes and yours are brown? You're an anomaly like the mama too, aren't you? That's why they're still feeding you as though you're a little baby. The world needs anomalies. We remind the world that there is magic and mystery and awe and wonder still in this world. All right, are you happy, little birdie boys and girls? Can I continue reading now? Good. Or he would write an answer to his mother between Ancona and Fiume, or perhaps it is between Middelkerk and some town whose name I don't remember. There is a lighthouse. The light of it flashing out over the sea at night like the flick of a fan. One flick, and then there is nothing. And then another flick, and Edelweiss grows in the meadows of the Venna Valley. Oh my goodness! Like, I don't know what you did, but I got wet from that. Did you poo on me? Did you? Can't see anything. Is that geography or botany or nautical science? It is a face. It is something that is there, is solitary, quite alone, eternally, and so, in a way, too, it isn't there at all. Or, what is it? Next you'll be sitting on my shoulder, cookie bird. I'd probably get a fright if he tried to sit on my shoulder though. It's the really big long beak that would make me a bit nervous so close to my face. Just look at him. He really is stunning. Look at you. Is you a pretty bird? Is you a pretty birdie? With the crow behind you? Look at it. Just delightful. And this one over here on my right, behind my right hand shoulder. Look at that. The whole family is here. The Sacred Space family. Yes. But there's no Easter bunnies. No. Tragically, alas, no. Naturally, he never posted these senseless answers to his mother's letters. There was something impalpable missing, something that was needed to make his certainty complete. Once he had been travelling by night with his mother and Hyacinth, and in the small hours, out of the depths of that inexorable fatigue which makes the bodies in a train sway to and fro in search of some support, it seemed to him that his mother was leaning against Hyacinth, and that she knew she was, and that Hyacinth was holding her hand. His eyes had widened with anger at the time, for he was sorry for his father. But when he leaned forward, Hyacinth was sitting at some distance, and his mother's head was inclined to the other side, away from him. Then, after a while, when he settled back in his seat, the whole thing happened all over again. that seeing and not seeing something was torment, and the torment itself was a darkness through which it was hard to see. My goodness. Finally, he told himself that now he was really sure, and he resolved to challenge his mother about it in the morning. But in broad daylight, the whole thing had vanished like the darkness itself. And another time, again when they were on a journey, his mother fell ill. Hyacinth, who had to write to father on her behalf, said irritably, "But I don't know what to say." This from Hyacinth, who wrote reams to mother whenever he was away? Then there was a quarrel, for again the boy had grown angry, and his mother began to feel worse. She seemed to be seriously ill. Something had to be done for her, and Hyacinth's hands kept on getting in the way of his, and he kept on pushing them aside. At last Hyacinth asked rather mournfully, "Why do you keep on pushing me away?" The note of unhappiness in that voice quite shocked him. How little one knows what one knows, or what one wants. Well, that is not difficult to understand. Yet he was capable of sitting in his room, tortured by jealousy, and telling himself that he was not jealous at all, that it was something quite different, something out of the ordinary, something oddly inverted. Oddly invented. And yet this was himself and his own feelings. Right, the crows have left sacred space. What are you two kookaburras doing? We've only got, oh no, he's over here. We've only got you two left now, my beautiful ones. Right above my head. When he raised his head and looked about him, everything seemed to be the same as usual. The wallpaper was green and grey. The doors were reddish brown, with faint gleams of light reflected on them. The hinges were dark, made of copper. There was a chair in the room, a brown mahogany and a wine red plush. But all these things seemed to be somehow tilted, leaning to one side. there was a suggestion in their very uprightness that they were about to topple over. They seemed endless and meaningless. What happened, Cookie? We've lost one. We haven't really lost him though, he's just flown off. He rubbed his eyes and then looked round again, but it was not his eyes, it was the things. The fact was that belief in them had to be there before they themselves could be there. I just think it's so cute how they listen to me reading to you. It's very delightful. If one did not look at the world with the world's eyes, the world already in one's own gaze, it fell apart into meaningless details that live as sadly far apart from each other as the stars in the night sky. She's looking at me, and then when I looked up, she turned her head. You're a beautiful bird. He only needed to look out of the window to see how the world of, say, a cab driver waiting in the street below was suddenly intersected by the world of a clerk walking past. The result was something slashed open. My ear's starting to hurt again. It's from my teeth. Dear goddess. Due for another painkiller, and they're just not touching the sides, are they? By the gods. Did a poo. Right. The result was something slashed open, a disgusting jumble, and inside out and side by side of things in the street, a turmoil of focal points moving along their tracks, and around each of them there extended a radius of complacency and self-confidence, all aids to walking upright through a world in which there was no such thing as above and below. Volition, cognition, and perception were like a tangled skein. One noticed this only when one tried to find the end of the thread. But perhaps there was some other way of going through the world, other than following the thread of truth. Oh, did you just yawn? Did you just yawn, beautiful kookaburra? Oh. At such moments, when a veneer of coldness separated him from everything, Tonka was more than a fairy tale. She was almost a visitation. Either I must make Tonka my wife, he told himself, or I must give her up, and give up these thoughts. But no one will blame him for doing neither one nor the other, despite these reasonings of his. For although all such thoughts and feelings may well be justified, nobody nowadays doubts that they are very largely figments of the imagination. And so he went on reasoning without taking his reasoning seriously. Sometimes it seemed to him that he was being sorely tried, but when he came to himself again and spoke to himself again, as it were, man to man, he had to tell himself that this ordeal consisted, after all, only of the question whether he would force himself to believe in Tonka against the 99% probability that she had been unfaithful to him and that he was simply a fool. Admittedly, this humiliating possibility had by now lost much of its importance. Chapter 10. It was, oddly enough, a period in which his scientific work went remarkably well. He had solved the main problems involved in his project, and it could not be long now before he got results. There were already people coming to see him, and even if it was chemistry that they talked about, they brought him some emotional reassurance. They all believed that he was going to succeed. The probability of it already amounted to 99%, and he drugged himself with work. But even although his social existence was now taking on firmer outlines and entering, so to speak, the state of worldly maturity, the moment he stopped working, his thoughts no longer ran along in definite grooves. The faintest reminder of Tonka's existence would start a drama going on in his mind, figures in a play, one taking over from the other, none of them revealing its meaning, all of them like strangers daily encountering each other in the same street. There was that commercial traveller of a tenor whom he had once suspected of being the man with whom Tonka had betrayed him. And there were all the others to whom he had ever pinned his certainty. It was not that they did anything. They were merely there. Kookaburra has now gone on his merry way. Oh, he was good company for a while, wasn't he? Lovely bird. Or she. Or even if they did do that frightful thing, it no longer meant much. And since they were sometimes two or even more persons rolled into one, it was no straightforward matter being jealous of them. The whole situation became as transparent as the clearest air, and yet clearer still, until it reached that state of freedom and emptiness which was void of all egoism. And under this immovable dome, the accidents of terrestrial life pursued their microscopic course. And sometimes all this turned into dreams, or perhaps it had all begun in dreams, in a pallid, shadowy realm from which he emerged the instant he shed the weight of his working hours, as though it were all meant as a warning to him that this work was not his true life. Little Bo, who are you singing to now, little handsome boy? All the wild birdies have gone. It's just you and me now, kid. Maybe he calls them in. Are you calling in the wild birdies? You're a busy birdie, aren't you, little boy? Very busy bird. It's peaceful without Kermie biting on your tail, isn't it? Mean little mofo. Yes. Kermie says, what about me, Mama T? If you can't play nice, you won't play at all. Simples. Oh, the lorikeets are here. Is that who you were whistling to, little Bo? They're drinking out of the big African tulip tree blooms. Getting drunk. Not a bad pastime for an Easter Sunday afternoon. Right. It was so sweet looking down at me from up high in the tulip tree. African tulip trees. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love you. Yes, I do. Right, carry on. These real dreams were on a deeper level than his waking existence. They were warm as low-ceilinged, bright-coloured rooms. In these dream rooms, Tonka would be harshly scolded by her aunt for not having shed any tears at Grandmama's funeral, or an ugly man acknowledged himself to be the father of Tonka's child, and she, when he looked at her queryingly for the first time, did not deny it, but stood there, motionless, with an infinite smile. Well, this had happened in a room with green plants in it, with red rugs on the floor and blue stars on the walls. And when he turned his eyes away from that infinity, the rugs were green. The plants had big ruby red leaves. The walls had a yellow glimmer as of soft human skin. And Tonka, still standing there, was transparently blue, like moonlight. I haven't really thought of moonlight as being transparently blue before. Interesting. He almost fled into these dreams as into some simple-hearted happiness. Perhaps it was all mere cowardice. Perhaps all they meant was that if only Tonka would confess, all would be well. He was much confused by their frequency, and yet they had not the intolerable tension of the half-waking state, which was gradually bearing him higher and higher away out of it all. Dear goodness. In these dreams, Tonka was always as great as love itself, and no longer the careworn little shop girl she was in real life. And she looked different every time. Sometimes she was her own younger sister, not that she had ever had a sister, and often she was merely the rustling of skirts, the ring and cadence of another voice, the most unfamiliar and surprising of movements, all the intoxicating charm of unknown adventures which came to him, the way such things come, only in dreams, out of the warm familiarity of her name. And they gave him the floating sense of joy that lies in anticipation, even though still tense with unfulfillment. These ambiguous images made him feel seemingly undefined, embodied affection and more than human intensity of emotion. And it was hard to say whether these feelings were gradually detaching themselves from Tonka or only now really beginning to be associated with her. When he reflected on this, he guessed that this enigmatic capacity for transference and independence that love must also manifest itself in waking life. It is not that the woman loved as the origin of the emotions apparently aroused by her. They are merely set behind her like a light. And whereas in dreams there is still a hair's breadth of margin, a crack separating the love from the beloved, in waking life the split is not apparent. One is merely the victim of doppelganger trickery and cannot help seeing a human being as wonderful who is not so at all. He could not bring himself to set the light behind Tonka. The fact that he so often thought of horses at this time must have been somehow connected with this, and obviously was a sign of something significant. Perhaps it was Tonka and the sweepstake in which they drew blanks. Or perhaps it was his childhood, those beautiful brown and dappled horses, their heavy harness decorated with brass and fur. And then sometimes there would be a sudden glowing of the child's heart in him, the heart for which magnanimity, kindness, and faith were not yet obligations that one disregarded, but nights in an enchanted garden of adventures and liberations. Yet, perhaps too, this was merely the last flaring up of a flame about to die. The itching of a scar that was beginning to form, for it was like this. The horses were always hauling timber, and the bridge was always echoing under their hooves, a muffled wooden sound, and the timbermen wore their short checkered jackets, purple and brown. They had doffed their hats as they passed the tall cross with the tin Christ on it halfway across the bridge. Only a little boy who stood there by the bridge looking on in the winter refused to doff his hat, for he was a clever little boy and didn't believe in such things any more. And then he suddenly couldn't button up his coat. He couldn't do it. The frost had numbed his little fingers. They grasped a button and tugged at it hard, but just as they were pushing it into the buttonhole, it jumped out again, and his fingers were left helpless and amazed. However hard they tried, they always ended up in paralyzed bewilderment. And it was this memory that came back to him so often. What's my little handsome Bobo baby doing? Are you being a pretty handsome Bobo baby? Mama T loves all her babies, doesn't she? Even the dead sexy but useless ones. Never mind, we won't be thinking about that today. We try not to anyway. The ghastly horror of it all. Chapter 11. Amid all the uncertainties, Tonka's pregnancy took its course, revealing the harshness of reality. There was the shambling gait, with Tonka seeming in need of a supporting arm, the heavy body that was mysteriously warm, the manner of sitting down with legs apart, unwieldy and touchingly ugly. All the changing aspects of the miraculous process, steadily transforming the girlish body into a seed pod, altering all its proportions, broadening the hips and pressing them down, taking the sharpness from the knees, thickening the neck, making the breasts into udders, streaking the skin of the belly with fine red and blue veins, so that it was startling to see how close to the other world the blood circulated, as though that were a sign of death. All this unshapeliness was in fact a new shape, moulded as much by passivity as by main force, and the same distortion of human normality was reflected in her eyes. They now had a blank look, and her gaze would linger on things for a long time, shifting only with an effort. It would often rest for a long time on him. She was now keeping house for him again, waiting on him laboriously, as though she wanted to prove to him in these last days that she lived only for him. It's called nesting. Women do that in late pregnancy. Nest for these dead shit men who treat her as though she were a jest. Ask me how I know. But that was 40 years ago, and I'm free of that bastard as of 31 years ago. So there is that. I really wish, my undying regret is that I didn't take my newborn Crystal and just leave after he was so vicious to me when I was in labour with her. That really was the living end, and yet I dragged myself through that marriage for another 9 years and another child and migrating here to Brisbane. And the only real love and sweetness that was ever shown me really was Catherine and Joe Harris. It's true, you know, it's true. Well, wherever they are, blessed be. She showed no trace of shame for her ugliness and deformation, only the desire to do as much as she could for him, in spite of her awkwardness, when really he should be looking after her and nurturing her and protecting her as a new mother-to-be, whether it's his child or someone else's. She needed that level of protection. They were now spending nearly as much time together as on earlier days. They did not talk much, but they liked to be near each other, for her pregnancy was advancing like the hand of a clock, and they were helpless in the face of it. They ought to have talked the whole thing out together, but they did nothing about it, and time moved on. The shadowy being, the unreal element on him, sometimes struggled for words, and the realization that everything ought to be measured by quite different standards almost broke surface. But like all understanding, even this was ambiguous and without certainty. And time was running on, time was running away, time was running out. The clock on the wall had more to do with reality than their thoughts had. Excuse me. It was a suburban room where nothing of importance could happen. There they sat, and the clock on the wall was a round kitchen clock telling kitchen time. And his mother bombarded him with letters proving everything up to the hilt. Instead of sending money to him, she spent it on getting opinions from doctors in the hope of making him see reason. He quite understood this and no longer resented it. Once she sent him a medical statement that made it really clear to him that Tonka must have been unfaithful to him at that time. But rather far from upsetting him, it was almost a pleasant surprise. As though it had nothing to do with him, he wondered how it had happened, and all he felt was, poor Tonka, she has had to pay so dearly for a single passing aberration. Yes, sometimes he had to pull himself up short on the point of saying quite cheerfully, "Listen, Tonka, I've only just realised what we've been forgetting about. Who it was you were unfaithful to me with that time." So everything petered out. Nothing new happened. There was only the clock and the old familiar bond between them. And even although they had not talked about it, this brought back the moments when the bodies desired each other. They came like old friends who, returning after long absence, will simply walk into the room. The windows on the far side of the narrow courtyard were eyeless in the shadow. The people were all out at work. Down below the yard was dark as a well. The sun shone into the room as though through frosted glass, making each object stand out sharply in a dead gleam. And there, for instance, lay a little old calendar, open as though Tonka had just been going through it. And on the wide expanse of one leaf, like a memorial erected to that one day, there was a small red exclamation mark. All the other leaves were covered with everyday domestic entries, shopping lists, sums, and the like. And only this one was empty except for the one sign. I don't know why, but somehow that makes me happy. It's like a fuck you. But anyway, I shouldn't think like that perhaps, but that's all she had to say about that. Bada bing, bada bang, bada bing, bam, boo. Not for an instant did he doubt that this betokened the memory of the incident that Tonka denied. The time just about fitted. His certainty was like a rush of blood to the head. Yet certainty itself merely lay in this vehemence, and in the next instant it had again dwindled into nothingness. If one was going to believe in what this exclamation mark might signify, then one might just as well believe in the miraculous. What was so appalling was, after all, the very fact of believing in neither. There was a startled glance exchanged between them. Tonka had obviously seen him looking at that page in the calendar. In the queer indoor light, all the things in the room now looked like mummies of their former selves. The bodies grew cold. The fingertips became icy. The intestines were hot coils of tubing in which all vital warmth was contained. True, the doctor had said that Tonka must be spared any sort of stress if complications were to be avoided. That's probably why Crystal was transverse and had to be a forceps delivery. But at this moment, doctors were the very people whom he must not trust. And yet all his efforts to trust in something else were also futile. Perhaps the Tonka was not strong enough. She remained a half-born myth. You're back, Mr. Crow. You're all back. All right. It's your sacred space too. You've been all around the neighbourhood and you've come back to Mama T, have you? Oh, that's very lovely. What did you find out there? Anything exciting? No? But there's a change in the weather? Yes, I think so too. Come here, Tonka said gently. And they shared their anguish and their warmth in mournful resignation. Chapter 12. Tonka had gone into hospital. The turn for the worse had come. He was allowed to see her at visiting hours, so the time had slipped away irrevocably. On the day she left the house, he had his beard shaved off. Now he was more like himself again. Later on, he discovered that that very day she had lost patience, lost her head, in fact, and had gone and done something she had been putting off all this time for the sake of saving money, as though making a last gesture of independence before going into hospital. She went and had a decayed molar extracted. Synchronicity much? Well, I only gave birth to a dead tooth. No more babies for the Mama T. Too old and lacking a uterus will do that to you. Oh, you have to laugh. It's not actually fucking funny, but You'd have to laugh or you'd cry. What did my mother used to say? I'm so glad I'm not young anymore. However, she managed to keep all her internal organs intact. She did have dentures though. There was that. She did lose her gallbladder, so there was that. But I'm talking about, the other organs. Although she did battle cervical cancer at one stage. So there was that. So yes, I've forgotten about that, haven't I? I don't think they took her cervix, though. I think they just burnt the cancer off or lasered it off or whatever you... Yes, it was with a laser. Anyway, the old chook ultimately lived longer and prospered more than I did. There's a certain irony in that, especially since she was monstrous to be most of my life, but there is no justice in this world. Just ask my barrister, he'll tell you. Monsters and sadists, all of them. Are you going to sing to the beautiful crows? Are you my beautiful boy? What are you doing? Don't do that. Bang your beak on the bars of... That's got to hurt. Why are you doing that? Self-harming behaviours. It's a bit nuts. Her cheek must now be sadly sunken, and all because she would never let herself be properly looked after. Now his dreams began to intensify again. One dream recurred in many forms. A fair, plain girl. You're not a woodpecker. Stop that. You'll hurt your beak, you mad bird. Honestly. Why are you doing that, Bo? Why? A fair, plain girl with a pale complexion was telling him, that his new girl, some invented figure in the dream, had left him, at which he became curious to hear more and exclaimed, "And do you think Tonka was any better?" He shook his head with an expression of doubt on his face to provoke the girl into making some equally vehement protestation of Tonka's virtues, and he already had a foretaste of the relief he would get from her decisive answer. But then he saw a frightful, slow smirk gradually spreading over the girl's face, and she said, "Oh, her. But she was a dreadful liar. She was quite nice, of course, but you couldn't believe a word she said. She always wanted to be a smart woman of the world." What caused him most anguish in this dream was not that dreadful smile, which was like a knife cutting into his flesh. The fact that he could never ward off the eager platitudes at the end of it. Powerless in his sleep, he heard them being uttered as though out of the depths of his own mind. And so, when he went to visit Tonka, he would often sit at her bedside with nothing to say. He would gladly have been as magnanimous as in certain dreams he had had earlier, and he might actually have brought himself to be so if he had devoted to Tonka some of the energy with which he was working on his invention. Although the doctors had never been able to find any trace of the disease in him, he was linked with Tonka by the possibility of some mysterious connection. He only had to believe her, and instantly he would be diseased. And perhaps, he told himself, that would have been possible in some other age. He was beginning to enjoy letting his imagination rove back into the past, telling himself such things as that in some other age Tonka's fame might have spread far and wide, and that princes would not have disdained to woo her. But nowadays, this was something he really ought to think about at length some day. So he would sit at her bedside, being kind and affectionate to her, but never uttering the words, "I believe you." And this, although he had long believed in her, for he believed her only in such a way that he was no longer able to be unbelieving and angry, and not in such a way that he would face the rational consequences of it. This not believing kept him immune and safely anchored to the earth. The things that went on in the hospital tormented his imagination. It was all doctors, examinations, routine. The world had snatched Tonka away and strapped her to a table. Yet he was almost beginning to regard this as her own fault, if she was indeed something of deeper significance under the surface of what the world was doing to her, then everything in the world ought to be different too, so that one would want to fight for it. And he was already beginning to surrender. Only a few days after their separation, she was already a little remote from him, for he was no longer able to make daily amends for the strangeness of her all too simple life, that strangeness that he had always felt in however slight degree. And because he usually had so little to say when he visited Tonka in hospital, he wrote letters to her, saying a great deal that he otherwise kept to himself. He wrote to her almost as seriously as to some great love. Yet even these letters stopped short of ever declaring, "I believe in you." He was quite disconcerted to receive no answers from Tonka, until he realized that he had never posted these letters. The fact was, he could not be sure that he meant what he wrote. It was simply a state of mind that he could do nothing about except write it out of his system. That made him realize how lucky he was. Despite everything, he could express himself. Tonka could not do that. And the moment he saw that, he saw Tonka for just what she was, a snowflake falling alone in the midst of a summer's day. But the very next moment, this no longer explained anything. Perhaps it all amounted to no more than that she was a dear, good girl. And time was passing too quickly. One day, he was horribly overtaken by the news that she would not last much longer. He reproached himself bitterly for having been so careless, for not having looked after her properly, and he did not attempt to hide this from her. Then she told him of a dream she had had a few nights earlier, for Tonka also had dreams. In my dream, I knew I was going to die soon, she said. And it's a funny thing, you know, but I was very glad. I had a bag of cherries and I said to myself, never mind, you just gobble them up quick before you go. The next day, they would not let him in to see her. Chapter 13. And then he said to himself, perhaps Tonka wasn't really so good as I imagined. But that again only went to prove how mysterious her goodness was. It was the sign of goodness that a dog might have had. He was overwhelmed by a dry, raging grief that swept through him like a storm. It went howling around the solid walls of his existence, crying, I can't write to you anymore. I can't see you anymore. But I shall be with you like God himself, he consoled himself, without even knowing what this was supposed to mean. And sometimes he could simply have cried out, help me, here I am kneeling before you. Sadly, he said to himself, think of it, a man walking all alone with a dog in the mountains of the stars, in the sea of the stars. And he was agonized with tears that became as big as the globe of the sky and would not come out of his eyes. Wide awake, he now dreamt Tonka's dreams for her. Once he dreamed to himself, when all Tonka's hope had gone, he would suddenly come into the room again and be there with her. He would be wearing his large checked brown tweed travelling coat, and when he opened it, underneath it, he would be quite naked. Nothing on his slender white body, but a thin gold chain with tinkling pendants on it. And everything would be like one single day. She would be quite sure of that. This was how he longed for Tonka, as she had longed for him. Oh, she was never a loose woman. No man tempted her. If someone pays court to her, she will rather give him to understand with slightly awkward mournfulness that such affairs are likely to come to a bad end. And when she leaves the shop in the evening, she is quite full of all the noisy, jolly, annoying events of her day. Her ears are full of it all. Inwardly, she goes on talking of it all, and there is no scrap of room for any stranger. But she knows too that there is a part of her that remains untouched by all this. There is a realm where she is grand, noble, and good, where she is not a little shop girl, but his equal, deserving of a great destiny. And this was why, in spite of all the difference between them, she always believed she had a right to him. What he was concerned with achieving was something of which she understood nothing at all. It did not affect her. But he belonged to her because at bottom he was good, for she too was good. And somewhere, after all, there must be a palace of goodness where they would live united and never part again. What then was this goodness? It did not lie in action, nor yet in being. It was a gleam when the travelling coat opened. And time was moving much too fast. He was still clinging to the earth. He had not yet uttered the thought, "I believe in you," with conviction. He was still saying, and even supposing everything were like that, who could be sure of it? He was still saying that when Tonka died. Chapter 14. He gave one of the nurses a tip. She told him of Tonka's last hours and that she had sent her love to him. Then it crossed his mind, casually as one remembers a poem and wags one's head to the rhythm of it, that it was not really Tonka at all he had been living with. It was something that had called to him. He said these words to himself over and over again. He stood in the street with these words in his mind. The world lay around him. He realized, indeed, that he had been changed in some way, and that in time he would be yet again another man. But this was, after all, his own doing and not really any merit of Tonka's. The strain of these last weeks, the strain that is, of course, of working on his invention, was over. He had finished. He stood in the light, and she lay under the ground, but all in all, what he felt was the cheer and comfort of the light. Only, as he stood there looking about him, suddenly he found himself gazing into the face of one of the many children round about, a child that happened to be crying. There in the full blast of sunlight, the face wriggled and writhed like a ghastly worm. Then memory cried out in him, "Tonka, Tonka!" He felt her from the ground under his feet to the crown of his head, the whole and the whole of her life. All that he had never understood was there before him in this instant. The bandage that had blindfolded him seemed to have dropped from his eyes, yet only for an instant. And the next instant, it was merely as though something had flashed through his mind. From that time on, much came to his mind that made him a little better than other people, because there was a small, warm shadow that had fallen across his brilliant life. That was no help to Tonka now, but it was a help to him. And this, even though human life flows too fast for anyone to hear each of its voices clearly and find the answer to each of them. And thus concludes the last 3 days of offerings of Tonka. Forgotten who the author was. Let me just go back. I think it was Robert Musil. Just want to confirm that, because facts are facts, people of Earth. Yes, Robert Musil. And tomorrow, all being well, if I'm not writhing in agony, I've got through today's stories. 1 hour and 56 minutes, and I'm in pain now, but it's slightly improving, just slightly, mind. Yesterday was terrible. I was really suffering yesterday, really badly. So it's like that, good days and bad days. But I'll be back hopefully tomorrow with John, spelt Jon, written by George Saunders. Let me just see how long that story is. So that's quite long, so that will possibly be split up into 2 or 3 videos or so, depending on how I'm travelling in the miraculous, ever-twirling blue marble of the planet, and the equally miraculous space-time continuum in 3D reality, and my solid hobbit body with toothy issues and spiritual edifications and eternal sunshine of the spotlit mind. And what was that movie? Spotless Mind. Well, mine's spotlit. Boom, 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 boom. Everything magnified, intensified, glorified and edified. Yet gadal yet gadash. But we're trying to avoid that outcome just yet. My imminent transitioning and transmutation and metamorphosis from this physical form into some other existence. A freedom in another paradigm that Karen at the Brooklyn Standard wished for me. Fuck off. Oh well, I guess she didn't mean it maliciously. She was just channeling, as drunk people tend to do. To you, Karen, if you've watched my videos, I bear you no ill will, unlike the envy and jealousy and petty rivalries that were going on in that space. I actually bear no one any ill will. I just wanted my beautiful life with a man by my side who loved me, and it was a merry little dance and a trickster's game that got played, and 'tis what it is. One day I won't be here anymore, and none of that will matter. Goddess bless, Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. I'm going out tomorrow with my beautiful Tarina. We're going to look at the markets at South Bank. It should be a pleasant, lunchtime afternoon. And we must try, her and I, not to overdo things, because she's still fighting to recover from her knee surgery, and I'm still fighting to recover from my toothy surgery. 2 surgeries. So we just have to move through each day with grace and aplomb and not overexert ourselves. Anyway, the sun's brightening up, the light's brightening up, and it really is a glorious day. You saw how I had my whole team of birdies around me earlier. Wasn't that delightful? And yes, Goddess bless from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. Bye for now.